Thank you. Do you hear me well? Yeah, perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Johnny Martinez, and it's just so nice to see people face to face. It's very nice to meet you. I currently work for a company called Shock Logic, and we're absolutely passionate about improving the lives of events organizers and associations everywhere through the use of technology. During this presentation, I will be wearing a slightly different hat. I'll be representing the Events Industry Council's Apex Commission. And for those that don't know, the EIC is the main global federation within our industry that promotes high standards and professionalism across the event sectors. And we do this through programs such as the Certified Meetings Professional Certification, the CMP, if you haven't heard of that, and also our signature program, which is the Accepted Practices Exchange, APEX, which I'm part of. For the past year, a group of global event organizers and myself, we've been compiling a ton of research, and we have come up with the Virtual and Hybrid Events Guidebook. I'm leaving this on screen right now because the guidebook is not available yet. It's going to be officially published next week at IMEX America. But if you scan this now, you will have access. You can register, and you'll receive a notification next week when the guidebook is available for download. So I'll just leave it there for a few more seconds. I will share that code again at the end of the presentation, so don't worry about it. One of the key things that we've learned about the past year is that it's essential to put ourselves in other people's shoes. This applies both to clients and suppliers. Our industry has gone through monumental changes, and most people are not used to experiencing what we've gone through. So it's very important to communicate from a place of kindness, compassion, and empathy. This is why we say be kinder than necessary, because everyone out there is going through some sort of struggle. Now, when it comes to designing, developing, and implementing technology solutions, we want to make sure that it is as easy as possible, especially for users and attendees. And this is what Steve Krug points out in his book. What can we do to keep it simple and apply common sense? Apply common sense to web and mobile usability, interfacing. What can we do to make sure that the user experience is as smooth as possible, so you don't have to click too many times on a website to get through what should be a straightforward booking process? Digital is, as we define it in the guidebook, a set of technology tools that facilitates interaction and enables all three types of meeting and event delivery methods shown on screen. So in that sense, when we're looking at in-person, virtual, or hybrid, there are certain definitions and certain expectations from the audience around these formats. Overall, the acceleration of digital event technology and the increased know-how driven by the pandemic provides a very lasting opportunity for event designers to, reevaluate the event programs and come up with the best elements to connect and inspire attendees, and doing so in a more inclusive, diverse, accessible, sustainable, and global way. There's a big part on sustainability, on accessibility and inclusion in my presentation, so I will be talking about that. Digital strategy can be applied to events of all levels of size and complexity. It could be, connecting to boardrooms via video conferencing to large multi-venue events with thousands of participants. So when we look at the frequently asked questions, a lot of organizers, a lot of people out there are asking themselves, can I just do it myself? It's possible. Of course, many individuals and organizations are trying to save money and resources, and they're wondering, can I just do it on Zoom, Teams, WebEx? I think some of you may be able to answer that question yourselves. Why is it that hybrid is more expensive? At the same time, where can I start looking? Is it enough to just do a web search? Shall I be attending a trade show like Eventec Live? And how long do I need in advance to plan for my webinar, for my online, for my hybrid experience? And this is the reason we've come up with what we call the event format spectrum. And you go from 100% in person to 100% virtual. I think the main thing here is that there is not just one type of hybrid event. So there are a few things that we need to consider. You need to find that perfect balance. So planners should feel empowered to, make decisions about relative investments in the virtual and in-person elements of a hybrid event. As in the case of all strategic planning decisions, there are a variety of decision considerations, when determining a digital strategy for meetings and events. So, as I mentioned before, there is not just one template to follow. For example, an in-person meeting can have a remote audience contingent that has watch-only access. Similarly, a small in-person audience may gather, but be a fraction of the larger audience participating remotely. So this dynamic will affect the human and financial resources that we have, as well as the technology that we're going to use to deliver the event. So when we were looking at, when we were putting together the guidebook, there were 4 main outcomes that we identified. Number 1, education. So, of course, when we put together a program, when we deliver sessions, presentations, but also when we're selling as a company, we're still educating people around what is it that I have to do next. So you're getting the audience acquainted with how much you know and how much they can expect to invest in certain services. And this is, similar between in-person and virtual formats. So education-heavy meetings may do well in, any of the 3 formats: in-person, hybrid, virtual. The second outcome is motivation. And, whether it is a sales incentive or, sponsorships, or you want to drive, more interactivity into one of your streams, or loyalty, or increase revenue, you want to organize the program in such a way that it inspires people to do better, to do more, or to do it quicker. Collaboration is the next outcome, and it lends itself to multiple formats. So it's based on the degree of collaboration desired, 100% in person or 100% virtual. They probably offer the easiest formats to include all the different perspectives. Hybrid it poses a challenge to when we try to ensure that both the online and the in-person audiences are meeting their needs. So we need to think about how to do that, and what can we do to make sure that they're equally engaged. And networking, and I think it's a key aspect that a lot of us miss out on when we attend online conferences. Most people organizing a trade show, organizing an exhibition would agree that the easiest thing is to have this kind of setup and meet people in person. But there are a number of facilities, a number of technologies that we can implement to also increase the level of networking across our events. So we're going to be looking at some case studies as well to understand how is it, how did they do it. The first case study is the Goal Lactation Conference. So this is an event that is 100% online, and do I need to use the mic? This is an event that is 100% online, and the key thing here is to note that they're running the event next year from April 4th to June 30th. So a few months. And the thing here is that the organizer, they understood that the attendees, lactation consultants, they earn very little money. So it's already difficult for them to travel, book accommodation, or invest a lot of money into going abroad for an event. So they decided in 2015 to run the conference completely virtual. And what it has allowed them to do is to expand or extend the life cycle of the event in ways that they couldn't before. And they offer on-demand facilities, recording and presentations. So people pay a specific fee to have access to limited content. And then if you want to have access to more, you have to buy a premium package, for example. Now, they also offer, they understand that, now that since they've been running this event for a few years, they've been able to attract people not just from North America, where the organization is based, but also from Latin America and parts of Europe. And they understand that they need to schedule the program or the sessions in different time zones at the same time. So it means having a dedicated regional program for these attendees. And they also offer reduced registrations, or cheaper registrations for those attendees coming from developing countries, for example. The next case study is ESOT, or the European Society of Organ Transplantation. And in 2011, they realized that the demographics were changing. They realized that doctors were getting younger, and that a lot of people just didn't have time to be at the event and take advantage of everything they were offering in person. So they decided to set up an online platform, an online community. And what they do is that they have the speakers and the different presenters, they come to an interview booth that they have on site. And while the sessions are happening, something that we forget about quite often is what is it that the online community is doing during the breaks, right? Because are they networking? Are they actually talking to any of the online exhibitors? It may be, but it was quite important for ESOT to schedule content that the online community was consuming during the breaks. So they would do, between sessions, they would do interviews to some of the main speakers. And that's the content that the online audience would be watching. And a lot of that would be recorded and then available, afterwards. What happens as well is that, for those that couldn't attend the event in person or couldn't be available during the event, then they have special access for the on-demand sessions after the event. And when the event is in person, these are some of the facilities available for the surgeons. So they can actually come in and play and take part in a simulation of an organ transplantation. So all of this is recorded, and that simulation is available to them afterwards. When we look at the hybrid formats, there are few things that we consider here. So there are three main formats that we look at. Number one is single in-person venue plus virtual. And this is very much like the Super Bowl. So, this is an event that happens every year. So you have one main venue in the US that is hosted also in English by the local team. And you have a live stream where millions of people are watching the event around the world. You have Hub and Bespoke, and this is like Eurovision, where you have the main event happening at the host location, but then you will have watch parties in satellite locations, especially very popular in London, very popular in Australia, where you will have a local host delivering the content in the local language. And then you have the multi-venue approach, where, for example, the ICA Congress, for anyone that knows ICA, they did this year. The main Congress was in Cartagena, but they had hubs, regional hubs, one in Paris and another one in Asia, where they had their own programs, their own speakers, but the global community was able to interact with everyone else by sharing on social media and following the official hashtag, right? So that's an example. And this is a type of setup, thanks to our friends from Encore, where you have the main cloud management facility sort of like encompassing all of the data and all of the functionalities that you need, but you will have different feeds. And the key thing here is testing that all of this works before the event. So when we are considering, how long do I need to implement this kind of setup, I would say a few months, right? Now, I want to mention accessibility because I think for me, one key thing is that while all of us are able to do many things, we often forget about, the least advantaged. People with disabilities, and some of the questions I would ask myself, how is it the platform that I'm using, does it have functionalities, or does it meet the accessibility requirements of some of my attendees? And is there any mention of accessibility in their guidelines or the paperwork that they produce? This is something all of us, you should be asking your providers. And the other aspect is inclusion. So as we open up and we make this available to attendees around the world, are they able to understand the content? Are they able to follow the program? How can we do that? So as part of the guide that we're publishing, we've put together the 18F accessibility checklist. You can look it up, or you can ask me more about it later. But it will have a number of considerations for developers and for software engineers that they need to consider when designing, implementing the technologies for our events. It goes from critical to mild to minor. Among the critical things, there are simple things such as contrast ratio. This is how easy it is to read the text on the website. So you consider the font type, the size, and the background you use. Generally, a contrast ratio of more than 3:1 is needed to make sure you are fulfilling the requirements of a visually impaired person. And as I said, well, most of us are mobile and able people. There are people out there that just need a little bit more time to complete the information, especially during the data capture process. So you need to consider the length of your timeouts. And this is something you can double check with your developers or with your webmaster. If a user is not able to request more time or the request is less than 20 seconds, it's a failure. It's not right. It means that it's not user-friendly enough for most people with disabilities. They need more time to get through that. Setting the language of your site allows assistive technology out there, programs that allow people with, disabilities to interact with the content correctly. Assistive technology will read foreign languages, but they need to know, what is the main language of the page. And whether the content's language differs from the page's language. So this is something that you can set in your own, in the platform. And then finally, when considering inclusion, again, language is key for any event. Recently, we had an event where the main speaker was a Scouser. He was from Liverpool. And, and we had people from all over the world attending this conference, especially watching online. And there were real-time captions and subtitles on, but they were using artificial intelligence to deliver this. And what happened was that even the AI was finding it difficult to keep up with this Scouser. So in some cases, you need to consider, okay, do I need to bring in a remote interpreter or someone that will make sure the message is being delivered, is actually being understood by everyone? It's quite key. We may rely on, automated tools these days, but we would recommend that if you have a very international audience, then it's worth having someone, behind the keyboard, making sure that they're typing the right translation, the right information. Risk considerations and how to go about selecting the platform. So I'm not going to go too much into risk because this is already broadly covered in our risk management guidebook, and you're very welcome to scan this now because I'm not going to show it later. It has a number of considerations needed. I mean, what is it that I need to plan for? Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. Some of the things that we consider in this case, if it's self-service, what are the advantages? In this case, so of course, for a lot of people there will be lower costs, but the learning curve is much higher. So, there is very limited what I can often do if I have developed this platform myself. It may also mean that I often have to contact the technical person I got involved to make any changes. When it's full service, when you outsource what you do, again, there are a number of advantages. And, some of the disadvantages, there will be a higher cost. There's no doubt about that. And, we need to make sure that your timeline is aligned with the schedule of events that your provider has, because it may be that they're too busy to pay attention to your needs. So, it's quite key, even in this case, to choose the right provider, choose the right support. something that is quite key as we deliver our solutions, and something that we recommend in the guidebook, is that you surround yourself with experts. When you're building your team, you make sure there will be a main project manager, there will be a technical coordinator, there will be how many parallel sessions do you have happening at the same time? Do you have a room coordinator assigned, to each of these rooms? Who's looking after the feed, the bandwidth, or making sure that the system can't be hacked while the event is happening? And in this case, I would suggest, have a cybersecurity expert on board. And in this sense, it's also key to surround yourself with people that believe in the same things, people that have your set of values, people that are willing to take the flag until the end, people that are willing to stay late if needed, people that think like an organizer. So, as you recruit, let's avoid going for the shiny stuff. Let's make sure that whoever is on board is someone that can deliver. As part of this process, and these are the very last few slides I have. How much time do I have? 3 minutes? Oh, perfect. So it is, to make sure that you define the right process from beginning to end. And what really helps is having your timeline, but also on the day having run sheets, AVQ sheets, that allow you to know what is it that is happening at the top of every minute and who is taking care of those things. The tools, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And I think something that we forget to ask our providers is, can I have a look at your documentation? What kind of languages, software, coding do you use to put together your technology? What is the support available? Is it going to work online? Is it easily accessible from Safari, Chrome, Firefox, and Microsoft Edge? And this is what I was mentioning earlier, but it is quite key to choose an implementation template that works for you. And what really helps here is to see what other people have done in the past, because, this is not our first rodeo. We've been doing this for a little while. People have been delivering hybrid virtual events now for quite a few years. And as you've seen from the case studies, people have been doing this since 2011. It's not something that came up just during the pandemic. So ask other people, how have you done it? And what can we learn? How can I do it better? So finally, I just want to leave you with this quote. And I think this is something that all of us, my team, ourselves, should be repeating constantly. Don't let what you cannot do get in the way of what you can do. Quite often, you say, oh, I haven't done this because I am waiting for my supplier to send it to me. I haven't done this because, we're still waiting for the testing to be done. But there are other things that you can do to get ahead of the game, to complete the process, and, to make sure that you're still delivering without being held back by small things. So that's it. That's the end of it. And again, if you want to scan that QR code to have access to the guidebook, it will be published next week. So you just need to enter your details.
All right, round of applause for Johnny. Thank you, mate. Mountain wealth of knowledge, this guy. So this question was great, but it's just vanished. Hang on. Oh, that's awkward. Okay, there it is. What do you see as the biggest difference between the needs of an in-person attendee and a virtual attendee, which is something you touched on, and I hadn't even thought about things like accessibility if it's virtual, because you don't realize that, well, it's not a physical event, so it's not my problem, but it is still your problem.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I was gonna say accessibility becomes an issue for
Yeah.
all different formats. I don't know if you've seen for the COP26 in Glasgow, there was a government minister that could not access the event because there was no wheelchair access. So these are things that we have to think about. I think if you don't have that kind of awareness, for a virtual online event, then you will commit the same mistakes.
Yeah.
But I think it is much easier to forget about the considerations for an online or virtual event. And it is probably mainly because you can't see them. So, get an expert involved in telling you, what is it that I can do to make my online facility accessible. And as I showed you, there are very simple things you can do and things that are quite critical in that sense. And then increasingly, you can focus on the mild and the minor details to deliver a flawless experience.
Amazing. And I imagine a lot of the answers will be in this guidebook as well. So
Absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks again, Johnny. Absolute legend. We're having a 15-minute break and we'll be back. See you soon.